Hello, it's the 22nd of August 2025, and today would have been Ray Bradbury's 105th birthday. Welcome to Bradbury 100. Laurel and Hardy, of course, the funniest comedy duo of all time, one of the few comedy acts from silent cinema to successfully transition into sound cinema. And Ray Bradbury was a huge fan. He saw lots of their films when he was a child. He saw them live on stage as a young adult. And he wrote about Laurel and Hardy in a number of his books and stories. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. A few days ago on Facebook, I posted this image with a teaser of a question asking, what do these things have in common? And lots of people said, well, these are all Ray Bradbury's late career works. These are all books that were published after the Stories of Ray Bradbury collection was published. All very good guesses. But I had to keep pointing out that this isn't just a picture of books. There's the Ray Bradbury Theatre in there, a DVD set. There's also at the bottom of the stack, there's the new Ray Bradbury Review, which is a journal. So these aren't all Ray's books. But the one thing they do all have in common is that they all refer to Laurel and Hardy in some form. And in fact, that's not even a complete set of books by Ray that reference Laurel and Hardy. He refers to them in others that I omitted to put into the stack. So I'm going to talk about many of those references today, where you can find them, and what their significance is, if any. I think that ultimately the only significance is that Ray really loved Laurel and Hardy and he wanted to celebrate them. So I'm here to celebrate him celebrating them. How do we know that Ray liked Laurel and Hardy? Well, he talked about it in interviews, such as the one he did for Playboy in 1996. Yeah, I know, everyone buys Playboy for the articles. Well, in this case, the articles included Playboy interviews the very politically incorrect Ray Bradbury. And in the article, this is what Ray says. I had just turned 14 when we got to California with only $40. Ray would have turned 14 in 1934, so we know that that's when he is placing the events that he's just about to talk about. So the family are in Los Angeles, and Ray says, I was madly in love with Hollywood. We lived about 4 blocks from the Uptown Theatre. I learned how to sneak in. There were previews almost every week. I'd roller skate over there. I skated all over town, hell-bent on getting autographs from glamorous stars. And who did he see there? It was glorious. I saw big MGM stars such as Norma Shearer, Laurel and Hardy, Ronald Colman, and so on. Now we're going to move on about 20 years, and we get to 1953. Ray becomes 33 years old in that year. He's an established writer by this point with a couple of books to his name and many, many short stories. And he's invited by the filmmaker John Huston to write the screenplay for Moby Dick. Now, where do you go when you're going to write the screenplay for Moby Dick? Well, of course, you go to Dublin. Well, that was because John Huston had a house in Ireland and he wanted to obviously be at home when he was doing the work. So Ray sailed out to Dublin on an ocean liner with his family, and he stayed in the Hibernian Hotel in Dublin. No longer there, but this is what it looked like back in the day. And Ray claimed that on his first day in Dublin, he read a very interesting headline in the local newspaper. This is the story as told in the Bradbury Chronicles, the authorised biography of Ray Bradbury. It says, as Ray was reading the Irish Times, he discovered this ad. Today, one day only, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy. The famous comedy duo was making a rare appearance that night at the Olympia Theatre in a benefit show for Irish orphans. It goes on to say, Ray went to the Olympia and bought the last available ticket. His seat was front row centre. That night, Ray felt as if he was 14 again. Now this sounds very unlikely, doesn't it? But I've fact-checked it, and it's true. Laurel and Hardy arrived in Dunleary on the 9th of September 1953, and they were planning to stay for 33 nights, a whole month, at the Royal Marine Hotel, because they were planning a show which they were going to put on in Belfast and London, not Dublin. But kind of as a last-minute thing, they agreed to do one charity show in Dublin at the Olympia Theatre. It was one night only, and it was the 11th of October 1953, the very day that Ray arrived in town. So Ray really did go to the show. Whether he really had the last ticket, whether he was really front row centre, I don't know, can't prove that. But everything else about the story checks out. So Ray Bradbury saw Laurel and Hardy live on stage in 1953. This was really their last tour, and this is what Ray recalls, again from the Bradbury Chronicles. When the curtain went up, he recalled, Stan and Ollie did all their great routines. When it was over, I went backstage and I stood by their dressing room door and I watched all their friends going in and out. I didn't bother them, I didn't introduce myself, I just wanted to be in their ambience. So Ray loved Stan and Ollie as a kid. He saw their films and possibly saw them at the local cinema in Los Angeles, the Uptown Theatre. And as a 33-year-old writer in Dublin, he saw them live on stage and backstage. Now we move on another 20 years or so, and we get to 1978, and Ray writes about Stan and Ollie for the first time. He writes a short story which is published as The Laurel and Hardy Love Affair. And he writes this when he's in France. And on the front page of the manuscript, he typed, Avignon, July 27th, 1978, midnight. And the story at this point was called The Laurel and Hardy Lovers, which I think is a nice dual meaning of a title. The story is about a man and a woman who meet at a cocktail party and they discover that they have a mutual love of Stan and Ollie. I'm going to come back to that story in a while because there's more to it. But at the moment we're in 1978. Ray has written this story, but it hasn't yet been published. And we're going to move on and look at something which is not at all to do with Stan and Ollie. This is a magazine called Red Book, which is a women's magazine. The strapline at the top of the cover says, "The Magazine for Young Women." And this particular issue contains, among other things, 8 great stories, plus a Ray Bradbury chiller. The chiller in question is a new story of Ray's, which was published for the first time here in 1978, and it's a story called Gotcha. It's got nothing at all to do with Stan and Ollie. Put that from your mind, but just register this thought that Ray wrote a story called Gotcha in the same year that he wrote The Laurel and Hardy Love Affair. Now, Gotcha is very soon collected into one of Ray's books. The next available book for it to be put into is The Stories of Ray Bradbury, which is a very large compendium of his best stories, which was published in 1980. So Gotcha has been in a magazine and in a book. Nothing at all to do with Laurel and Hardy. We'll move on now another few years, and we get to Ray's first novel in a couple of decades, Death is a Lonely Business. This was his murder mystery. It's his return to novel writing. It's possibly Ray's big comeback, because although he'd been publishing short story collections over the decades, his short story output had declined somewhat, and the collections had been getting fewer and further between. But then all of a sudden, in the mid-80s, here comes this novel, apparently out of nowhere, and it's quite well received. It's got a lot of internal references to Ray's own earlier works, his earlier career, and his earlier life. And therefore, it's a very meta piece of fiction. It's a very good book. In the book, the narrator, a very thinly disguised Ray Bradbury, is temporarily separated from his wife, who's gone down to Mexico. Now, the book's set in the 1940s, and these two young married people are temporarily separated, but they stay in touch by phone, which in those days, the 1940s, would have been difficult and expensive. Anyway, when they talk to each other on the phone, they adopt their Stan and Ollie habit. Well, here's another fine mess you got me in. My voice, on its way to Mexico City, was Oliver Hardy's voice. "Ollie," cried Peg, using Stan Laurel's voice, "fly down here, save me from the mummies of Guanajuato." Stan and Ollie, Ollie and Stan. From the start we had called ours the Laurel and Hardy romance, because we'd grown up madly in love with the team, and did a fair job of imitating their voices. So here in Ray's 1985 novel, which is nothing at all to do with Laurel and Hardy, he finds himself characterising this couple as talking to each other in Laurel and Hardy voices and dialogue. That's the very same tactic he'd used in this short story, The Laurel and Hardy Love Affair, which hasn't yet been published. So in the late 70s, he wrote this short story when he was in Avignon, remember? A few years later, some elements from that story turn up in this novel. This is very typical of Ray Bradbury's writing. He'll be writing one thing, he'll be working on another, and ideas will cross-pollinate from one to the other. I see this all the time when I look at his manuscripts, when I look at his draft screenplays, that he's always carrying ideas around in his head, and they spill out into whatever it is he's typing up at the moment. And Ray would typically be working on several things at once. He often said that he would start a new short story every day, but that doesn't mean he would finish that story every day. He would start one, put it aside, the next day start another, the next day start another, and then maybe go back to the first one and do some more work on that first one. So he would be juggling multiple pieces of work, and ideas genuinely pop up in one and then transfer into another. And I'm pretty sure that what happened here is that he wrote the Laurel and Hardy Love Affair at the same time that he was developing the manuscript for Death is a Lonely Business. So the same idea turns up in both places. As far as the reader is concerned, this is the first place that this has ever happened, because Death is a Lonely Business is published in 85, but the short story hasn't come out yet, so nobody's seen it. So the experience of the reader is very different to the experience of what's going on, if you like, in Ray's head when he's writing this stuff. Now, here's another fine mess you got me in, is the line that's used there in Death is a Lonely Business. And if you know anything about Laurel and Hardy, you'll know that that's not actually the line. The line is actually, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. And if you don't believe me, here's the proof.
Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's Here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Well, here's another nice mess I got you into. Here's another nice mess you've gotten me into.
So, Ray got the line of dialogue wrong. Well, I think we can forgive Ray for getting it wrong because even Laurel and Hardy got it wrong. The line is another nice mess, but they made a film called Another Fine Mess. So they even misquoted themselves. And if you don't believe me, here's that.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, Hal Roach presents for your entertainment and approval Laurel and Hardy in their latest comedy entitled Another Fine Mess. Photography by Jack Stevens, recording by Elmer Vegas, editing by Richard Currier, dialogue by H.M. Walker, and direction by James Parrott. We thank you.
In Death is a Lonely Business, this conversation over the phone continues, and the next line that comes up is the narrator says, "Why don't you do something to help me?" Like Mr. Hardy. And of course that's another catchphrase, another repeated line that turns up over and over again.
Why don't you do something to help me? What can I do?
So this is just a passing moment. It's a very short scene, probably a page at most in the book. But it's something that's clearly on Ray's mind, is writing about these characters, trying to write in their verbal style. Now, a few minutes ago, I mentioned the short story Gotcha, which was published in 1978. In 1985, Ray turns it into a script for his TV series, The Ray Bradbury Theatre. Park that for a moment, we'll come back to it. Meanwhile, in 1987, we're back at Playboy again. Let's buy it for the stories. This particular one includes various articles and items by various famous people, one of whom is Ray Bradbury. This is the first public appearance of the Laurel and Hardy love affair, the short story that he wrote in 1978 in Avignon. He wrote it as the Laurel and Hardy Lovers. By now he's retitled it The Laurel and Hardy Love Affair. The following year he puts it into his short story collection, The Toynbee Convector, so this is where most people will have seen the story for the first time. And there it is on page 89 of my UK paperback edition of The Toynbee Convector. And this is the opening of the story. He called her Stanley, she called him Ollie. That was the beginning, that was the end of what we will call the Laurel and Hardy love affair. She was 25, he was 32 when they met at one of those dumb cocktail parties where everyone wonders what they are doing there. But no one goes home, so everyone drinks too much and lies about how grand a late afternoon it all was. The story then goes on to describe precisely how they met. He was on his way for a needed drink. She was eluding a lovesick stranger. When they locked paths in the exact centre of the fruitless mob, he, on impulse, seized his tie and twiddled it at her, wiggling his fingers. Instantly, smiling, she lifted her hand to pull the top of her hair into a frowsy tassel, blinking and looking as if she had been struck on the head. So, two very familiar Laurel and Hardy gestures, the twiddling of the tie and the tousling of the hair, the defining physical characteristics of these two great comedy characters. and a beautiful shorthand for two people saying that they both love Laurel and Hardy. They don't have to exchange any words, they just have to do the actions. And these two characters are instantly in love with each other because of this. "Stan," he cried in recognition. "Ollie," she exclaimed, "where have you been?" "Why don't you do something to help me?" he exclaimed, making wide, fat gestures. And what do you do if you meet somebody for the first time and you discover you have this common love of Laurel and Hardy? If you're in Los Angeles, you head for the Music Box Steps. She said, and her face brightened even more, "I know the exact place, not 2 miles from here, where Laurel and Hardy, in 1930, carried that piano crate up and down 150 steps. Well," he cried, "let's get out of here." His car door slammed, his car engine roared. Now, surely you know about this piano. Everyone knows about the piano in the Laurel and Hardy film, don't they? Well, let's be clear.
Pardon me, Mr. Postman. Yes, sir. Could you tell me where 1127 Walnut Avenue is?
1127 Walnut Avenue?
Yes, sir.
That's the house up there, right on top of the stoop.
That's the house up there, right on top of the stoop. Just a moment, maybe I can help you.
Now, back to Gotcha. Why do I keep talking about Gotcha, which has nothing at all to do with Laurel and Hardy? Here's why. In 1978, Ray, among other things, wrote 2 short stories. He wrote the Laurel and Hardy Love Affair, which is about 2 people meet each other, fall in love through their common interest in Laurel and Hardy, and then split up because they find their lives are incompatible. It's a little rom-com. The same year, he writes Gotcha, which is about 2 people who meet, fall in love, but in their games, in the kind of foreplay that they have with each other, the woman does something which scares the life out of the man, and it instantly fractures their relationship. He feels he cannot trust her anymore. Gotcha is a very haunting story, and it may not be for some people. Some people will find it too much, but if you want to read one of Ray's better late career stories, look up Gotcha. It's a very affecting psychological story. But anyway, in the same year, Ray wrote these 2 stories about these 2 love affairs. In 1985, he wrote the screenplay for Gotcha for his TV show. And look what he does with it.
Ahead of everyone.
I guess the place to start is at the beginning, there at that boring party where we first met.
My psychoanalyst. That, no, like he became a dictator. I'm serious.
I think I'm supposed to be
Gotcha begins with the beginning of the Laurel and Hardy love affair. This is not in Gotcha the short story. This is new for the TV version. He's actually combined two of his short stories together.
Pardon me.
Somebody had the idea of setting their first meeting at a costume party. That's not how it is in the Laurel and Hardy love affair. There, it's just a cocktail party. The characters are not in costume.
Stanley.
Ollie.
And I think that adds to the meeting. It makes it more plausible and more fun. Now, these early episodes of the Ray Bradbury Theatre were actually filmed in Toronto. So how do you do the music box steps scene? Where do you get those steps in Toronto? Somehow they found them, and the script was modified to accommodate just a small change to the plotting to make it plausible. So this is what they do in the Gotcha episode that uses the Laurel and Hardy love affair beginning.
Okay, where are we?
Don't you know? Look.
What? Can't be.
It is.
But Laurel and Hardy never made a movie here.
4,000 miles from here. The music box? 57 years ago.
But then what is that up there?
The piano box. The music box that Laurel and Hardy carried all the way up the steps, and then it chased them all the way back down again. In 1931. We shot this 1-minute commercial here today with Laurel and Hardy lookalikes, and we couldn't afford to fly to Los Angeles, so we found this hill, by God, and these steps, and we paid $40 for that piano crate. You want to see?
We're going up there?
Together.
Now, there's a very nice discussion of how Ray combined his two stories, the Laurel and Hardy love affair and Gotcha, to make his TV script for Gotcha. And the article appeared in the new Ray Bradbury Review, issue number 1, back in 2008. And it was written by the late Bill Tupont. You can lay hands on the new Ray Bradbury Review through Amazon and various other outlets, by the way. Okay, let's move on to some more instances of Stan and Ollie turning up in Ray's fiction. In his novel A Graveyard for Lunatics, he puts in another reference. Somebody says to the character Roy Holdstrom, "Where did you find this terrible wreck of a car, Mr. Holdstrom?" And he says, like Edgar Kennedy doing a slow burn in an old Hal Roach comedy, "This is the car in which Laurel and Hardy sold fish in that 2-reeler in 1930. Cost me $50 plus 70 to repaint." And selling the fish, again, one of the most famous scenes in Laurel and Hardy. If you've never seen it, here it is.
For the first time in our lives, we're a success. A nice little fish business and making money.
You know, Ollie, I've been thinking.
What about?
I know how we could make a lot more money.
How?
Well, if we caught our own fish, we wouldn't have to pay for it. Then whoever we sold it to, it would be clear profit.
Tell me that again.
Well, if you caught a fish, and whoever you sold it to, they wouldn't have to pay for it. Then the profits would go to the fish. If you caught...
I know exactly what you mean. Your idea is to eliminate the middleman.
In Ray's book, Quicker Than the Eye, there's a couple of stories that reference Stan and Ollie. First is Remember Sasha, where Ray's alter ego Douglas Spaulding appears. Douglas Spaulding is the main character of Dandelion Wine, and he's a thinly disguised Ray Bradbury. And the character, or the character name of Doug Spaulding, pops up again and again through Ray's works, especially his short stories. And here he is in Remember Sasha. It must be explained that Maggie and Douglas Spaulding were best described as crazed romantics. Long before the interior christening of Sasha, they, loving Laurel and Hardy, had called each other Stan and Ollie. The machines, the dustbusters and can openers around the apartment had names, as did various parts of their anatomy, revealed to no one. And in the same book, Quicker Than the Eye, we have a story called Another Fine Mess, named after the Laurel and Hardy film with the wrong title. It should be Another Nice Mess, remember. Now this story is about the Laurel and Hardy steps. Bella Winters lived in a first-floor apartment on top of Vendome Heights, and had lived there now for only a few days, so it was all new to her, this old house on an old street with an old staircase made of concrete climbing steeply straight up from the lowlands below, 120 steps, count them. "There are some men out on the steps," said Bella. "Talking, yelling, not fighting, but almost. I heard them last night too, and the night before." So this story is about Bella, who hears the ghosts of Laurel and Hardy out on the steps because she lives next to the steps. But anyway, with Another Fine Mess, Ray finally writes the characters of Stan and Ollie, albeit as ghosts. Then later on, in Driving Blind, there's a story called If MGM is Killed, Who Gets the Lion? And here's another reference to a Laurel and Hardy film. They don't appear as characters in this story, but Ray writes, "MGM is here, right? 2 miles from the Pacific coast, 2 blocks away from where Laurel and Hardy ran their Tin Lizzie like an accordion between trolley cars in 1928. Now, I don't know if the year is quite right, but here's the film where Stan and Ollie's car turns into an accordion.
that thing out of here, will you?
Now we move on a bit to one of Ray's last books, One More for the Road, and this contains a short story called The Laurel and Hardy Alpha Centauri Farewell Tour. And here Ray writes the characters. They're not ghosts, but they are some sort of strange immortal beings. Laurel and Hardy ambled or lurched into the bar. Gasps all around. Ollie surveyed the scene. "Are you for real?" Will Grimes said. "We most certainly are." Hardy thumped his chest grandiloquently. "But how come you're black and white, like those old two-reelers? No colour?" "When we were first created, We were full colour, but folks said, no, that's not Stan and Ollie. So back to the lab to be bleached out and sent to fall off roofs. Inglorious black and white, Stan blinked. Still, I said, how come you're here 2 centuries after your demise? We never died, Stan piped. Thank you, Stanley. We never lived, never died. We are first cousins to the light bulb, telephone, the penny arcade, wireless telegraph, vacuum tube, TV transistor, the Salk vaccine, intra-embryo split atom DNA explorer, the fax, email, internet. One vast Humpty Dumpty back on the lab wall. 2 goofs chased by a music box downhill, I said. Touché. 2 mad Christmas tree salesmen utterly destroying a house. That. And in nightgowns saw a gorilla in a tutu waltz by their beds. So this is Ray absolutely celebrating these 2 characters with memories from their greatest films, their greatest moments. And it's a humorous piece. It's not a story of any great profundity. But what I do like is this idea of Stan and Ollie being immortal and being, as it says, first cousins to the light bulb, the telephone, and so on. It's tying Stan and Ollie very much to that technology that brought them into our lives. Most of us didn't see Stan and Ollie live. We've only ever seen flickering representations of them on screen. But that's part of the charm, I think, that they exist on screens in these boxes in the corner of our houses that we sit and watch and enjoy. So you can tell from this story, Ray really loves Laurel and Hardy, and he finally writes them as characters, and he's made them immortal. They're just like the gods. They are the gods of comedy. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this ramble, this random wandering through the Laurel and Hardy appearances in Ray Bradbury stories. I decided to do this as a visual piece because of all the visual aspects of Laurel and Hardy, but this is also going out as an audio podcast. And in the main feed for the audio podcast, in recent times, I've done similar discussions of Ray and The Simpsons, Ray and X-1, the radio drama series, and Ray and Suspense, also a radio drama series. So I'm always looking for these various media-related things to do with Ray's work and how Ray represents media in his fictions. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you around for the next Bradbury 100.